Don't be feeling blue, no, no. Shine your light all around, like I know you can do, baby. Yeah, I know you can do. Now some people call me. Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Cara St. Louis returns to the show. Cara shares her research and insights into the theory of whether the sun is our true source of food and nutrition. And to kick the show off, Cara talks to us about her upcoming online lecture, Taste Buds, the Great Food Con, which is scheduled for Saturday, February 16th, 2019, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information about the lecture and to obtain tickets, please click the link in the description box below. And so without further ado, here's the conversation with Cara. Well, folks, we're going to have a great show today. Cara St. Louis is back with us, and Cara is a good friend, and we go back a long ways. And every once in a while, we catch up, and we just have our conversations. And we're going to spend a good portion of the show, I would guess, on a new book that Cara is going to release called, is it Taste Buds, Cara?
It's called The Great Food Con, a.k.a. Taste Buds.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
It's a long title.
All righty. And you're up in the northeast these days, and it's very cold there, yes?
Yes, Mike. I am in Maine right now, and we've just gone through a weekend, which I'm remembering now is fairly typical for this part of the world. I had been away from this for about 6 years when I was in London, which is cold and wet, but it doesn't snow. And when you want to get from point A to point B, you get on the tube, or you get on a bus, or you walk, or whatever. This is a real shock to my system, I have to say. We've had, the whole northeastern United States has had this ice/snow/ whatever. And I'll tell you, I walked into this house. I've got this little house. I'm lucky enough to be renting. I live here now with my daughter. And I walked down in the basement and I saw an oil tank. Man, my heart hit the floor with a thud. I was like, no. Are you freaking kidding me?
Oil
I'm
heat?
back to oil.
Yeah.
It's expensive. I'm spending like $400 a month keeping oil in that tank. Can you imagine?
I can't imagine, because we had that when I lived on Long Island many years ago. And I remember even back then, it was very expensive to heat the house with oil.
Yeah, and I'm missing my wood-burning stove. That was the difference. If you have a wood-burning stove, which most people do in Maine, Maine is about a combination of wood and oil. Very, very little house on the prairie up here still, which is great in many, many ways. But in the winter, it's dangerous, downright dangerous. There's a lot of ice and that kind of stuff. But, and also I have to say, I'm probably going to get every Mainer I know is probably going to be mad at me in a second, but there's a real macho, about driving in the snow up here. That's how they gauge you as, to the size of your, what. It's how you feel about driving in the snow. I actually had someone say to me, yeah, when it snows, you got to drive it like you stole it.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Yeah. But yeah, that's their whole sort of swagger about driving in the snow up here. And I'm thinking, you know what? I have kids who still need me, whom I love.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to die, dude. Anyway, so anyway, the point being, I miss my wood burning stove, because a wood burning stove you can cook on. If everything goes to hell in a handbasket around you, you just huddle around the wood burning stove. Right?
Right.
And you're warm. People die up here when the electricity goes out, as they do in many, many places. I'm not saying it's just Maine, but yeah, it's been a hellacious weekend, and I'm super, super glad to have gotten to the end of it so I can talk to Mike. I just dug some of my car out. I have to tell you, last night, was it? I don't know. I was on Facebook with a friend who had just come to me and said she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And because they know that I've just been through this thing with my eyes, and it was nutritional, and I did some Chinese things, and my eyes are, I no longer have the issue. So she came to me and asked me to talk about it and stuff. And the split second we started getting into it, I realized that there was water pouring through my kitchen ceiling. So I know, right? Maine, hey, in the winter, right? Woo! So I had to go deal with that. Freaked myself. Anyway, whatever. I don't care. I'm here. We prevailed. Mike is on the other end, as he always is. He's one of my most dependable friends in this community. And so there he is, and here I am, and we're going to talk about my new book, which comes actually with, I've been threatening to write for a very long time. And it comes with a lecture that I'm doing online in a couple weeks, February 16th. I'm doing the lecture part of this because last year, this time of year, I did a private invitation-only lecture on the Fae to kind of float that out there and see how people were were responding to the information and, that kind of thing. And so I invited the people I trusted to come and listen to what I had to say, and that worked out really nicely. So I think from now on, Mike, I'm going to do a winter lecture in January online because that's the only way you can get people's attention. Yep. They will not show up with their bodies in seats anymore. They will not, which is a big shame because there is nothing like talking in front of a room full of beating hearts. Yep. Nothing. And I will try to do that once a year if I can. That's just not easy. Anyway, so this will be my winter lecture this year. The subject or the title of this book is, as we just said, The Great Food Con, AKA Taste Buds. Something I've been thinking about for a very long time. It is connected to everything that we've been talking about and doing, going all the way back to chemtrails and the sun thief. One of the things that I've always said is the reason I got involved in that as deeply as I did is because it was so clear right off the bat that it was an esoteric crime of the highest order to get between us and the sun. And I just had to know what the hell was going on with that. And it gets crazier and crazier and crazier, but it makes more and more sense as I get into this food issue that all they have to do is turn off our food, which is the sun. And then when they turn off our food, they turn off the earth's food. They turn off, it's of course, this is what they want to do. Bill Gates is getting involved. I can't even tell you how I feel about that. Who gave Bill Gates permission to do that? Is he the emperor of the universe or something that he can just go do that? Does he not have to ask permission before he flies around in the plasma doing more destruction? Does anybody ask these questions anymore, Mike?
No, they take guys like Bill Gates. If you see how they do it, what they do is they prop them up first as this friendly face. In other words, he was the person behind Windows, the operating system, and how wonderful that is, and so on. And so they build it up so that he becomes quote unquote trusted. Then they move him into another piece of the matrix, and then he starts to talk about that aspect of it. It has nothing to do with Windows or operating systems or computers anymore, right?
Right.
And so people are now conditioned to look at Bill Gates and think that he's the voice of reason, that he is some kind of an authority. People feel like they have an affinity for him because they think they know him because of the marketing that's been done to put him out there.
Right.
So who's given him authority? Nobody's given him authority. People basically just accepted it based upon the conditioning that was put out beforehand.
Because this is a very topical subject, the book goes to a lot of things that we've been talking about for a long time. There will be tangents. There should be tangents, and we'll talk about those. Anyway, by the time this book comes out, which I'm hoping will be in about 2 weeks, several, half a dozen, maybe less than half a dozen talk show hosts, the people I actually trust, will have either copies of the PDF or they will have copies of the book. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm sick and tired of people ripping me off. And they're gonna. As soon as Mike and I finish this lecture, somebody will have something out in 48 hours, just based on what I say. Okay? I've made my peace with that. It may not sound like it, but I have. I've made my peace with that. What I have learned is that people have copies of my book or they have explanations on their shows, and there it is. And that's all I really care about. So on with the book. So let's talk about, I did give him an outline, which I'm actually going to refer to because why? Because it's a big subject. It's a bit unwieldy because it goes to so many different places. Ask yourself what we were supposed to be to begin with. This goes to my work on the Fae. This goes to my work on the seed race. In the beginning, what was that, right? I have information that there was an entity involved in midwifing us. Well, that shouldn't be hard for anybody to get a hold of because one way or the other, we believe in an entity that birthed us. that gave us life or whatever. We even believe in the Big Bang, which I'm going to talk about later too.
Well, we got here somehow, right?
Somehow we got here. Let's say somehow we got here. And I would venture to say that when we got here, we were in mint condition, still in the box. Nothing wrong with us. I would postulate that. Okay. Then as gradually over time, we lost our sovereignty. We lost our ability to maintain our integrity esoterically, emotionally, psychologically, physically. All of those things was eroded. Outside sources. Okay. So what happened? Well, I'm looking at a situation where in the next book called I, Magician, I'll be talking more about how we actually got here. My view is this, and I didn't invent this. People are doing work on this, and I will always credit them on this, okay? But when the earth was new, when the earth as it is was, shall we say, virginal, when it was ready to be mapped and landscaped and terraformed and managed and used as very, very important, if not the most important planet in our solar system to manifest entities from other, and I don't mean aliens. See, this is where we have to be very clear. When you're talking about, for example, the idea of astrology, let's say the idea of astrology, you're talking about the essence of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a constellation. It's not an alien with white hair. It's a constellation with energy. Or we're talking about the essence of Virgo or the essence of Capricorn. All of these things come from these constellations, which are huge, and they are not individuals. However, as a collective, the constellation has a signature and it has an energy, and I would say it has a will. It has a part to play. If you have any connection to astrology, you believe, as I do, that we are influenced by these energies all the time. And why wouldn't we be? In my view, why wouldn't we be? So there was a time when this earth source, I'm going to say source because still to this day I have no better way to describe it. Maybe one day I will. Source allowed or encouraged or gave the go ahead to these energies to come to the earth. And this was midwifed by our seed race, who were the Fae, which is why I say the Fae are not the fairy. Although we have learned a lot from debunking all of the crap that goes on around the fairy. It's not the same thing. I'm not talking about the same thing, which I have been saying for years. However, once I started talking about the Fae, everybody had to get on that bandwagon, Mike. Did you notice that there was just suddenly a renaissance of information about the Fae? Everybody had to have something to say about it. Even Graham Hancock had something to say about it. Because if you were in the ancient civilizations business, you felt like you had to take a position on the Fae.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just let everybody run with that. And I just kept saying, you guys have no idea what I'm talking about yet. But okay, go ahead. I'm enjoying it too. Anyway, these are the Fae. I have said that the Fae were tasked with putting in the ley lines, and they were. And then I spent a year or so going, and, because I didn't know where that went. How, why, what, where, who, how did that happen? What are you talking about? All I knew was I knew that the Fae had been tasked with putting in the ley lines. A year after that, I came across somebody's research that put it all together for me, which was to say that the energy from the constellations generated domes, which is going to make everybody happy. I don't care what shape you think the earth is. That's going to make everybody happy. Domes of energy. And they covered the planet with various sizes and intensities of these domes of energy. And within the context of these domes, you could access other dimensions. This is where the ley lines originated. You could pull the ley lines out of them. And in many, many cases, the Earth's response to a dome would be to raise a mountain. And so this is why we talk about holy mountains. A lot of people doing work on this. This isn't my work. This is work I was gifted with. And I am so grateful because it put that all together for me. Not all of the areas with these, well, the whole Earth is covered with them. Don't get me wrong. There's not a square inch that doesn't have one of these domes, but the response wasn't always a mountain. It was often a mountain. But the place on this planet that has the most power and the most amount of these little domes of energy that were given to us by the universe, by the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, and is actually under serious military control, Mike, surprise, is Avebury in Wiltshire.
Okay.
Not a shock. The Avebury, all of those megaliths in that area, that is the center of power from these. Okay, let's just talk about, I want to give you an example because as I said, this can be very difficult to get your brain around, and believe it or not, it does go to food. I know I am sailing this ship and the seas are high and mighty and rough, guys. I'm just trying to hang on. Okay, let's just take an example, the Untersberg, all right, which in my view is one of the most crazy, magical, sacred places on this planet. Very few people know about it. At the very top, there's a locus from which 12 ley lines radiate down from the mountain. Yeah? Very typical, the locus of the ley lines where you raise hyperbolic towers of energy so that you can manifest. The Druids did it all the time. We used to do it all the time. We did it with our voices. We did it with this frequency, this resonance chamber that is our head. All right. That was the purpose of all of this. Mike knows I'm pointing to my head, my nose, my cheeks, my mouth. You guys don't know that. My larynx, because it's a radio show. Anyway, that was the purpose of this resonance chamber, to manifest by frequency, by voice, by singing, if you will. There's a place near CERN where there are 26 ley lines that come together in a locus. CERN is sitting just about right on top of it. That's not an accident. But this is also at the bottom of around the Untersberg, at the bottom of the mountain, where each one of those 12 ley lines sits at the bottom of the mountain, sits a Catholic church right on top of it.
Of course.
Again, not a shock, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you have to understand, I think, before you can talk in any meaningful way about what's really going on with quote unquote food, you have to understand who we are, what we were when we got here, and what we're supposed to be doing. And this is what I call the greatest con, really. The great food con. It is the greatest con. People have been coming toward this understanding for a long time. So what's our job? Our job, as I said, is to manifest by using this resonance chamber and frequencies to harness the energy of the earth to manifest on this planet. That was our job. And it was the arrival of, I would say, an adversary, which I have tried very hard to locate the pinpoint the time when that happened. There's an Irish tale that I'm absolutely obsessed with called the Battle of Moytura, which is a landing story. You have the Tuath de Danann on one side, you have the Fomorans landing from under the water or across the water, and you have these two entities battling. Okay, I think that it's really important to understand that we have been broken. To a great extent, our abilities have been broken. How have they been broken? Well, one of the biggest ways that they've been broken is by the idea that we have to eat our landscape, eat our creations, eat our fellow
creatures.
That we are broken in some way, that we're lacking in some way, and that in order to survive, in order to keep going, we have to ingest our fellow entities on this planet. My postulate is that is not the case. That is not the case at all. This is something that also goes back to 2014, and Mike probably has heard me say this, or somebody else. We process 24,000 units of biophotonic energy every day. Now, it may have been, at the time I first said that people thought I was a lunatic, but the reality is that was a university study I was quoting. Okay, and all kinds of universities have verified that now. This is mainstream science now. 24,000 units of biophotonic energy, meaning energy from the sun, courses through our body every day. That's been around now for about 5 years, that information in our circles, and it doesn't even sound weird anymore. But the reality is that is what we use for sustenance. I was going to say eat. And that's just as good a word as anything else. But that's what we use for sustenance, and we transform that biophotonic energy. We make Quay, okay? We have been convinced on this planet that Qi is there. And that if we are serene enough, if we are focused enough, if we are balanced enough, if we are zen enough, zero enough, then we might be able to access this energy called Qi and live on it. Guess what, guys? That's backwards. That's absolutely the reverse of what the actual case is. We make that stuff. We make that stuff. It comes through us. It helps feed the planet. It helps feed the plants. It helps feed anything that lives and breathes and has a metabolism on this planet. We do that. We don't access that if we're good enough. I mean, why does everything have a religious connotation, Mike? Why is everything that got reversed on us over the millennia smack of this idea that we're just not good enough to take part in what's around us, and that if we're good enough we can, when in fact we're the ones who are bringing it. I mean, it's just such a crazy thing.
Under no circumstances are we collectively to understand what our true capabilities are. So everything gets turned upside down.
There you go. Okay. And one of the ways, because I know, I mean, Mike and I can talk all day and that's great, but I know we are finite today. So I want to make sure I touch on a lot of these points. The points will go into depth at the lecture and even more depth in the book anyway. And I gave Mike the links to get to either one of those things. Or to get to me if you want to talk more about it, that's fine too. I'm totally accessible. In a nutshell, though, what has happened was there was a transition. There was a transition toward which we went from being light beings to being feudal beings, to being hostages to the earth. How did we become hostages to the earth? Grains. Somehow we became invested in this idea that we had to sow seeds in order to eat, when that had absolutely never been the case before. Okay? A feudal system grew up around this idea that we had to sow grains, and a certain portion of those grains went to the feudal masters, who then sold it back to us, by the way, so that we could eat it. So there is that transition. That transition is something that I'm going to be investigating at great lengths. How did I come to this? Well, for about 5 years, I'd studied this idea of anidia, not eating. I think that started in 5 years ago, about 2013, I started studying this idea of actually being able to live on light. This is not news, and no, I'm not new age, so please don't hang that one on me, but that is an actual fact. People can live on light. Of course they can. That was our original intent. What came first, your digestive system or food? Were you born with a digestive system such that you needed to go out and find wheat, rice, grains to put inside yourself, or was your digestive system a response to something that was being pushed in your face? Okay. I also talk very much about the destruction of this resonance chamber that is your head. Okay. Let me just ask you a question. Have you ever been told that you can't sing? People have been telling children that forever. My mom was a music teacher. It used to make her insane because everybody can sing. It's what we can do. It's what we do. We make all that vibrate. We make all that vibrate.
Well, singing, that's what our voice is. It's a frequency.
Hundreds and hundreds of years of people telling you can't sing. And it's just a lie. Everybody can make all of that vibrate. But think about that resonance chamber. It's not just the addition of grains to your body. The Taoists call it bigu, the 5 poisonous grains. You will hear me say grains kill, and I'm not kidding. Okay. And the soybean is actually pulled into that grouping. Anyway, that's a Taoist, concept that grains kill. And that came along. I'm sorry, I'll get back to the resonance chamber in a second, but that came along between the transition from Taoism, to Confucianism. Confucius, or whoever he was or was working with or working for, he certainly was working for the monarchy, the emperor in China, that level of society. Those who would enslave you to make you grow their grains talked about how before there was grain, there was nothing but starvation, and there was a miserable life and all of that. When in fact the Taoists were talking about Eden. The Taoists were talking about Eden before the cultivation of grains came along. So you see there's a big line there that we're going to have to look into between one thing and another. In terms of your resonance chamber, let's talk about what's been done to that. First of all, you were told that you can't sing. Think about this idea of the witches around the cauldron, okay? Past, present, future, the Norns, Macbeth, all of that. Every Irish tale has these witches around a cauldron. The cauldron is your larynx. In Macbeth, they spit into the cauldron. The cauldron is your larynx, and the witches are generating song, resonance, manifesting the past, the present, and the future. How do you do that? Well, you have a sinus chamber that actually you're not born with. It actually develops as you grow. You have your lips, you have your larynx, you have your tongue, you have your uvula, you have all of these things, your adenoids, your tonsils. What have they been doing to your head in the 20th century? If they haven't destroyed this through a food addiction, which we're going to talk about in a second, they've been ripping all these organs out, right?
Yep.
Or telling you they don't matter, or they don't know what they do. Tonsils are a big part of your ability to manifest, to make that resonance chamber be what it's supposed to be. So they're trying very, very hard to destroy your ability, your resonance chamber to manifest, number one. And the wiliest thing that they ever did in the last 2 centuries was addict us via our tongue, our taste buds, right? And via our taste buds, the rest of our body. Now we talk about all the stuff that goes into our body that makes us ill. Now we talk about all the stuff that goes into our body that makes us fat. That's a new phenomenon. And there are armies of scientists out there working on better ways to addict your taste buds. I mean, people have been talking about that for a long time too. In Food Inc., remember that?
Yeah.
All of these people have been working on this one particular aspect of the great food con, and that is addicting us to stuff that we have no business putting in our bodies. So the question becomes, do we have any business putting anything in our bodies? This is what I'm working on right now. And I'm not even going to approach the idea of whether or not we can turn all that off. But if you think about it, Mike, think about what would fall in our culture and everybody's culture if there were no food industry. What goes with the food industry?
Well, pharmaceutical business would
Pharmaceutical business would
come
crash.
to its knees.
Yep,
Right. Yep.
right.
Big Agra.
Supermarkets, big Agra, yes. The transportation industry. What would happen to the transportation industry? Would there be a need for it if we weren't shipping food around all the time?
I get your point. A huge piece of it would get yanked out because they are transporting food every which way from Sunday,
right,
any given day of the week.
Right, right. And what about garbage? Let's talk about garbage, trash.
Right, trash. Yeah.
How much of trash is food related? Even if it's throwing away paper plates, even if it's throwing away your old table, your old dining room table, or your old this. Do you see what I'm saying? Most everything, I think, in an industrial world hangs on the idea of the food industry. What I think that every bad intention out there would be brought down if we didn't have to deal with this idea of food. Now, usually when I'm talking about this right here is when I put in a proviso that I'm not talking about anorexia here, guys. I'm not talking about bulimia. I'm not talking about any of those sorts of things. This is a completely different category, and I don't want anybody to think I'm encouraging that. This is something altogether different, okay? This is simply about the idea that we don't need, okay, I'm just going to say it, we don't need food to exist on this planet, and it's done nothing but injure us, destroy us, and get in the way of our ability to do what we were supposed to do here.
So are you saying, Cara, that basically sunlight is all that's needed?
Sunlight is all that's needed. That's what I'm saying. And of course, they're trying to get between us and the sunlight. Now, let's talk about the 20th century as well. Like I said, I will be going into this deeper as we go along. Maybe I can get Mike back after the book comes out after a while or whatever. But the idea is to briefly touch on all these subjects. Let's look at the cult of the foodie. Shall we look at the cult of the foodie from the 20th century? The chef, right?
Yeah. Which
sort of toward the end of the 19th century. But how did it really come into being? Who made food, turned food into a cult? Well, I think that was Julia Child. I think that was television and mastering the art of French cuisine on TV and, making it very sophisticated and very hip to be a foodie. That's still going on. There's that, and there's also the whole Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving dinner. This is your family. This is how you love your family. God Almighty, I fell for both of those hard. I cook for my family, therefore I love them. Right?
Right. Well, and then you had the advent of the fast food restaurants, the chains back in the 1960s. I remember when McDonald's first popped up. That piece of it, the fast food business, has been in place for, 60 years?
Yeah.
50, 60 years?
Yeah. Yep. And it's just getting worse and worse. Okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, Julia Child's a fascinating character. She's a fascinating character. And she did work for the OSS. I don't know. I'm not making any claims there. I'm just saying. And then she was on television, and then we were talking about putting food in a whole different category.
Plus, she looked like a guy in drag.
She did. She did, right? And yeah, so then she's on television, and she is convincing us that the very height of competency is to be able to master, that comes up a couple times, the art of French cooking. All right. That for me, that's a clear start of this role of the cult of the foodie. Now, another thing that opened up a big aspect of this for me was there's another book that my son quite likes that just came out by an Iranian woman. Is it Salt, Heat, Fat, and Acid?
I don't know.
Very popular book. You can see that on Netflix. Go watch it. But when I saw the title of that series and that book, I thought, well, that's just alchemy. That's just in your face, man. They're just telling you. They're just telling you what they're doing. There used to be an internal alchemy, and there still is. We still have that mechanism. Heat, salt, fat, and acid. Alchemy. All right. However, they've taught us that we need to use alchemy on things outside ourselves, ingest them. I mean, when I say it like this, it sounds insane. Ingest them to complete ourselves again, because we're lacking that, and we actually probably are lacking that now. Then the question becomes, how did that happen? How did that happen? Well, we became addicted to these substances. Perhaps our bodies stopped making them, or the processes in our bodies stopped working. They're still in there, but they're dormant. I think a lot of it has to do with the birthing process in the 20th century, where half of what we need to survive is left in the placenta and thrown away or sold to the elites. So we are kind of lacking everything that we need now, very much on purpose. This is a big subject. It's going to run from how we came here, what we were supposed to be doing, what happened to transition us to being sickly. There's a story of, like I said, I'm obsessed with this Battle of Motora story. It's a bardic tale from Ireland in which the head doida, the head druid, was walking to battle one day for this battle, waylaid by enemies in the other camp, and they said to him, if you can eat this huge vat of grain, we'll let you go, otherwise we're going to kill you, right? So he said, oh, I can do that. And in the story, he eats this huge vat of grain that then is actually mixed with animal parts and things like that. And then the head druid slept. In my view, what they're saying is the magic slept. For me, that's what that means. It's a very important story that I go back to again and again and again. So there is the ingestion of all these things that we're not supposed to be ingesting, which is not just Big Macs. It goes back to the dawn of time. And we have to understand that this is the greatest con, I think, that's ever been pulled on us.
So, Cara, what if somebody has suggests the idea or the thought that the reason why we have the food that we have versus, let's just say, sunlight, because I know the theory about all we need is sunlight, that people can actually survive off the sun, that it is a construct of the age that we're in. So the Greeks had the gold age, the silver, the bronze, and the iron age. There are those, I'm sure, that are listening to the show now that will say, yes, Cara's correct, but the advent of not requiring food, eating animals, and all that stuff was really a component of a higher vibrating age, like the gold or the silver. And so in the Iron Age, that's when it got introduced, right? So we're engaging in this type of diet, this type of eating, and so on. But as the earth moves through its ages, we will then move back into higher realms of consciousness, and this type of eating will go away. I'm just throwing that out there because I know there are folks that are going to think that.
I mean, that's a good point. That's actually a very, very good point. And there are two things that to talk about with that one, which is what came first, the metabolism or the food.
Right.
And actually, are you talking about a de-evolution, that didn't need to happen, that didn't need to take place, that wasn't natural? I think that's what we're talking about. Or are we talking about a natural evolution? And again, you've brought up alchemical principles, the metals as we went through the various evolutions of the earth, the planet, which is a real thing. Okay. And the fact that we might be evolving back to the original state. Again, very, very salient point. I think that that's probably the case. I think that's probably why we're being pushed to talk about this right now. Number one, there are all kinds of things, all kinds of evolutions that we're hitting, that we're going back to. They make people uncomfortable. I don't care. They do. We just have to understand that we are evolving back, or that we're coming back to a state where we can be more completely who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. We are evolving back to that state of not needing this food. But somebody has to say it, man. Somebody has to put it out there, or many, many people have to put it out there and make the case really well, so that it enters the consciousness, the group consciousness that's out there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I was going to say that there are many things that I say that make people uncomfortable. And I don't mean that as a joke. I'm just saying that anytime I do a show on anything, whether I'm the host or the guest, there's going to be a boatload of people that are going to disagree. Some of them will be very, very animated and become angry about what they're hearing or what they're listening to, and so on. There is a reason why we're having these discussions. And I do want to tell the audience this. For those of you that do get angry, or you think this is silly and nonsense, whether it be this or anything else that I talk about on my shows, you have to understand that for every one person that feels that way, there's 10 other people that this resonates with. The consciousness of the masses is expanding. I could argue that maybe not at the rate and pace we would like it to, but it is. And that's why, Cara, like you said, these conversations and these discussions are being had.
Yeah.
So my little message here to anybody who's listening and thinks that, we're crazy or nuts, whatever it may be, you have two choices. One, turn the video off and go watch something that makes you more comfortable and happy.
Mm-hmm.
Or two, continue to listen with an open mind and just take in some of what's being discussed here.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Those are really the two options.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And also, you have to, whenever I do something new, you don't have to, but I invite you to bear with me while I figure out how to talk about it for the first time, which is what Mike is allowing me to do. The first time you talk about something that is this radical, it's difficult to know how to talk about it. So this gives me the opportunity to lay it all out there and organize it vocally, manifest it with my larynx.
It's a process of discovery. This is what I have said so many times on so many shows with so many topics, is people also want everything in a nice big box with a bow slapped on top of it.
Right.
Well, how come you don't know this? And how come you don't know that? And what about this? And what about that? Well, you know what? It's a process of discovery. We're still exploring.
Right.
And instead of nitpicking it, well, it would be helpful if maybe you put your thinking cap on yourself. Yeah,
I'd love to hear some contributions.
Exactly.
Totally.
And contribute in a positive way. Yeah. Even if you agree to disagree, do it in a positive way. It's welcome,
Right.
So anyway, that's my little soapbox discussion for the show.
Right. So I think there's just a couple of things I want to touch on again with you, Mike, with your indulgence. First of all, let's talk about the alchemical aspects of this. And the fact that cookbook threw that right in my face, that we're just talking about alchemy. And if you watch this woman, her name is Imran Nosrat, delightful young woman who is a chef, and clearly this is her This is her thing. At the very end of all of these presentations, it's a documentary. She says, look, it's not about food. It's about everything else that goes along with food. It's about the people. It's about the community. It's about companionship. It's about all this stuff, which sounds really groovy and comfy and all of that. But think about that. That is what it's about. It is a tool. Food can be used as a tool. Food is used as a tool if we don't actually need food. And that's a radical way of thinking, okay? So when you're talking about alchemical processes in our body, okay, that this is what transforms the biophotonic energy to give sustenance to the planet around us and those on it, okay? You've got salt, fat, heat, and acid. That's the name of that book. And these are the four main components, if you will, of alchemy. I'm not pretending to be an expert. I just know that this is what makes sense to me. Okay, salt. Let's talk about salt. There's also, salt comes up a lot through history, through the Middle Ages. How do people keep things so that they can eat them later, right? This is about salt. As we go through food in the Middle Ages, we realize that the Catholic Church dictated when we could eat and what we could eat. That's just a fact. They didn't want you eating till after Mass, all right, to begin with. Well, what is Mass, Mike? Mass is
it's a ritual.
Well, it is a ritual, as are all of the things that surround eating, mealtime, okay? But it's also substance. Mass is substance, physically. They want to put Mass in there before you eat. They want to put their stuff in there before you.
Good point.
Right? Okay, so there's a lot of rituals that go around breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's going to be in the lecture. That's going to be in the book, okay? So alchemical processes within our body to transform that energy, salt, fat, heat, and acid. Salt cures meat so that we could eat it. Think about what I just said. Salt cures meat so we could eat it. Is meat sick?
Why does it have to cure it?
Why do we have to cure that before we can eat it?
Good point.
Salt is also part of the electromagnetic system of your body. Obviously, we all know that. We're a saline-based, sea salt-based unit walking around, right? But you're the salt in your body enables the neural system, the pulmonary system, the joints and all that. The joints operate in conjunction with the fat, by the way. Think about the fact that the magic protective circle is drawn with salt. You know, you put a circle around yourself, protecting yourself as the magician and everything in it with salt. Salt is the original organic crystal that's natural to us. When you replace salt with sugar, you have a problem. Sugar is not natural. Not the way we eat it. That's for damn sure. And you might remember Emily Moyer did a fairly deep, radical piece of work on sugar as programmable matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also a crystal. Okay. Salt versus sugar. Don't put sugar in your body really. And anyway, the entities that are trying to destroy us and keep us from manifesting as we are supposed to, can't deal with the natural balance of salt in our system. So there's a huge drive to get us away from salt. I invite you to think about that from the 1960s onward. You're supposed to put the salt down, aren't you? Don't put any salt in your body, for God's sake. Well, certainly don't put the iodized table salt in your body. That's poison. But sea salt is not poison. Sea salt is very much what we are on the inside, okay? All of the alternative salts that get mined and hacked and beaten to death getting out of a mountain, those are not really good. Only organic salt harvested from the ocean is good. Your amniotic fluid is what? Sea salt. Your blood is what? Sea salt, okay? The artificially orchestrated scarcity or hollow that we can't fill, right? Like I said a minute ago, is probably because half of what we're supposed to have in us when we're born gets thrown away. All right, so that's salt. Salt is hugely important. There are people who say the Philosopher's Stone is just salt. That's all it is. All right? Heat. Let's talk about heat. What does heat do? Heat causes us to ascend. It rises. It speeds everything up, right?
Right.
And it creates levity. Levity is very important. Levity is the opposite of gravity. That's what heat does. What does heat do in your body? Well, what do you do for your poor child when he's got a fever? You throw crap at it to stop the fever when the fever is what the kid needs. The heat to burn things out. That's an internal alchemy, an internal alchemical process. Okay, let's talk about fat. I recently came across, and I want to say this because this was very, very exciting to me. There is a guy, and I know you're going to laugh because his name is actually Professor Peter Light. All right? Professor Peter Light.
That's appropriate.
I know, right? He's the chief investigator of the Light Lab at the University of Alberta. All right? And he has discovered, that's a simple way to put it, but that lab has discovered that fat has a light receptor. Fat has a light receptor. All right. I mean, that alone is a chapter because you have to untangle all of that. They've been trying to get us fat free. They've been trying to get us low fat. What is fat? Fat is terrible. Don't eat fat. Right now, we're all eating high-fat, high-protein diets because it seems to be better for us. And the medical community is going off its nut about that because it is better for us. Anyway, so sunlight on the skin and its influence on fat metabolism is another thing we're going to talk about. That is that goes to the alchemy of heat in our bodies as well. I want to make you guys aware of that. I sent Mike the link to that. It's a 20-minute video. What happens is I see stuff like that and I pull out what I need. The hard science is almost never what I need. Almost never is the hard science what I need. But you'll be interested in that. There are light receptors in fat tissue. The ion channels, the fat tissue, as they apply to heat in the fat and work with the sun. They're talking about the melanopsin molecule. This is interesting, Mike. The postganglionic retinal cells in your eyes have to do with the receptors of fat tissue. Having said that, what that brought to my mind is the pituitary gland. We talk about the pituitary gland and how it gets encrusted in all this garbage that we take in, or the garbage that comes in through our eyes. But I know, without a doubt, that there are light receptors in the pituitary gland. How do I know that? Well, for most of my life, if there was a light on anywhere in the house, I knew it. And that's your pituitary gland. Do you have that phenomenon? A lot of people, we all used to have that phenomenon, Mike. My mom did till the day she died. Okay. If there was a light on in the living room, she could have been 10 rooms away and she knew it.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm trying to think if, I actually can't say that.
You can say that. That's true.
No, that I'm aware of a moment where, specifically where I knew a light was on and I wasn't anywhere near that room.
Well, now you'll be thinking about it.
Now I will be thinking.
Now you'll be thinking about it. These are light receptors primarily in your pituitary gland. Okay. Anyway, so I want to direct people to that fellow's work because that excites me, this idea that fat has light receptors and how much of the food industry, how much of the nutrition industry, how much of the medical industry is aimed at dealing with fat. And how our bodies are collecting fat now in ridiculous ways, in unhealthy, weird ways. Why is that piling on? There's no reason for that to be piling on. Maybe it's because there's something between us and the sun.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm saying? I understand that this is completely radical stuff. I get that. And I know there's going to be some immediate flack. But the reality is they get between us and the sun and our fat has light receptors. Something bad, something not natural, something unnatural is going to start to happen.
Well, first of all, we know that they are blocking the sun.
Right.
That's the whole aerosol spraying program. And the other thing is how they continue to change the light sources that we have inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
Changing the light bulbs.
Yes.
And going LCD, all different types, mercury-based bulbs and stuff like that.
Right.
So I always found that quite interesting where they put it under the guise of energy saving, right? Everything's always about saving energy. But I've always looked at it and said, why do they continue to alter the artificial light? Why do they continue to do that?
Right.
There's a reason why they do that. Now, I haven't figured out, well, I can hypothesize what the reason is because they're screwing with the light.
There you go.
They're just screwing with the light
yeah.
because these lights, especially like blue light as an example, affects you. It affects the human body. It affects like blue light at night. If you are exposed to that, you're going to have sleep problems.
Uh-huh.
Right? That's why I think that they're doing it. I think they're doing it as an ongoing program to keep the human body, the mind-body dynamic off balance. That's my opinion, okay? It's not scientific in any way, but, they have a reason for doing the things that they do.
That's okay. If it was scientific, I would trust it far less, Mike. I'm much more interested in what your intuition is. And I always will be. You trust your intuition. The science is something that was developed to justify all the wrong turns and all the crap that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Which is why they can't figure it out. Science hasn't figured that out yet. Well, I don't care. I don't want to hear about it. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather hear about people's intuition.
It's like telling us there's no cure for cancer yet, which is just
right.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Yep. Anyway, I don't want to.
Let's not go there. We've gone there, and we'll go there again. Absolutely, we will go there again. But I mean, okay. So we talked about this, how we tell ourselves the truth. We tell ourselves the truth constantly by saying things like salt cures meat so that we can eat it. Can I ask for one thing? Here's one that just leapt out at me. Why are grains called pulses? Why are they called pulses? What's a pulse? This is a pulse. The pulse is your blood. Why are grains called pulses? I don't understand that one. I mean, I think that that's suspicious. This is the kind of thing that leaps out at me as suspicious. Why would they call them pulses? They're not pulses.
Well, they do this all the time. It's basically word spell.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely word spell. And they're doing it to us instead of us having our agency over our abilities, over who we are and what we can do, right? So there came a time when we felt like that we were lacking. There came a time when we felt like we were lacking, and that was because of what we'd been robbed of. And at that point, there was a gesture in the world, we think anyway, of thanking the victim, that we were getting ready to eat, the essence. We started trying to eat the essences around us to take them into our body. The essence of the antelope, the essence of what? The buffalo. Do you know where I'm going with this? We started trying to incorporate the essence of those things around us because we felt like we no longer had that inside us. This is a Native American thing. I am not dissing Native American anything. Everybody in America is part Native American in some way. I mean, many of us are. That's not what I mean. But there came a point in the folklore of indigenous populations where we knew we were ingesting the essence of something because we felt like we didn't have it in us. And there became this idea of thanking the animal that we just ate, or the spirit of the animal that we just ate. And honestly, you could take that all the way to saying grace before a meal.
Yeah.
Thanking everything that's around you because you no longer have it within you. The fact of the matter is you had it within you. You were never supposed to not have it within you. It was taken from you in the greatest con that ever hit this planet, which is food, in my view. Okay? So, what came first, Mike? The digestive system or food? What do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I would think you would need the digestive system before you were able to take in the food that we eat now, right? So that had to be developed first, I would think. This is all hypothetical, right? Because if you started eating the food without the digestive system, I don't see how that would work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. So, it's an interesting question, isn't it? If in fact your mouth, in my view, is your mouth, your sinuses, your whole head cavity, your larynx, your lungs, all of that is a resonance chamber for manifesting. Now, we also know that our bodies really don't digest anything, that there's gut flora. There's bacteria in our gut that digest things. We don't digest anything. That we don't, which is another big problem. So where did those come from? Were we born with those? Did they enter our systems to save our lives, to save us from what was getting shoved in our resonance chamber? I'm sure, I'm well aware that people are going to think that I've gone off the deep end with this one, but I haven't actually. It's just seriously radical thinking. Think about that. People don't, this is your scientific fact. You can verify this with your scientific buddies out there. We don't digest anything. The bacteria in our gut digests things. The living entities that live in our stomach digest what we put in there. We don't. Okay? We can't. We don't have the ability.
Well, that's why some folks have to take probiotics in order to help with the digestive process. This is interesting. Some folks might say, going back to what we were saying before, Cara, about the particular age that we're in, that maybe the age in which where sunlight was enough could be an age where, most likely the gold age, I would say, where the body is maybe semi-etheric in a way. Those are my thoughts. And that this current system that we're in, which we've been in for thousands of years, has really brought it down to the curb.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
this is as low as it can go type of thing.
Absolutely.
And not to get off on a diatribe here, but about 2 years ago, I guess it's about 2 years ago, that's when I stopped eating meat.
Yeah. So
I was like everybody else, most people. I was eating hamburgers and having steak and stuff like that. And so to make a long story short, I watched a documentary about 2 years ago. I don't remember the name of it. It was on YouTube, and I got about 15, 20 minutes into it. That was enough for me to just realize that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So as we're going through this, what I'm thinking, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder here.
Oh, steal it. Do it.
No, because some of the audience might be saying, okay, well, we're never going to go back to right now at this point in time to a point where we are just taking in sunlight. I mean, right now I'm talking about, or that I'm definitely not a semi-etheric being. So what are you guys talking about? Like, what are interim steps? So I think the interim steps would be to really start to pull back and assess and evaluate what you are putting into your body. Like right now, yes, in my view, I have to put something into my body in order to live, right?
Right.
But it comes down to what are you putting into your body?
Yeah.
So it has to be done in an incremental way. You've got to step it down.
Yeah.
And you have to try to get back as close as you can back to basics. I'll just say that that's my little piece in case anybody was wondering, like, well, how do you fill the gap in between just living off sunlight and the way we're eating now? Well, the way that you close the gap is you have to really start to evaluate and make choices, healthy choices about what it is you are putting into your body.
Right. And then you have to reevaluate what healthy is. I mean, Mike makes a very, very, very good point, because in saturating myself in this subject right now, what I've come to understand deeply is how addicted I am to so many things. You try to change things, and you understand that they really have you. You think your head is just in the cell phone, dude? No, that's not it at all. They have you like the guy with the fava beans, with the mask, that mask over your mouth. They've got you, and they've got you hard. They've got you hard, not with anything that you need to survive, even in the most pedestrian analysis of what you need to survive as a human being. They got you. 99% of what you put in your body is strictly to keep you deeply, deeply addicted. Do you understand that? So if that's where we start with this, bravo, that's the place to start. I know that for myself. I mean, 5 years ago, all I really wanted to do was to be able to seriously, actively, purposefully tap into that light eating. God, that sounds silly. The light resonance, the light processing, right? I wanted to be able to make a conscious decision to do that and do it. And however that transpired, I mean, I think the people out there who have been able to do that take decades, not weeks. They take decades to change their spirituality enough to be able to come close to that. That's what that's about. That's reality. It's not these gurus who tell you can do it in a week. I would never recommend that kind of stuff. But 5 years ago, I really wanted to be able to do that. And in the last 5 years, what I've understood, what I've come to understand is how profoundly enslaved, how profoundly tethered, yoked to this food system I am. And I'm no different than anybody else out there. When you really start trying to analyze or gain some agency and control over what you're putting in your body, then you know where you're at, man. As Mike says, that's where the rubber hits the road. It's one of those places where the rubber hits the road. And that's where we're at right now with this. And I really think that, I really want to do, right now, my goal is to do a super good job of laying out the case so that everybody gets to a point where they're thinking about this radically and in a sovereign way, And also, I agree with him. Maybe I shouldn't say that you actually postulated that, Mike, but in my view was that you said, what if this is a evolution back to where we need to be? I think that is absolutely the case. I think that's absolutely the case. It's not the only thing either. I think that we were, what do I want to say? This is probably going to cause a lot of people's head to blow off, and I don't want to really get into it, but, this gender stuff, this not changing your gender, but this idea that you are non-binary, that you're both.
Right.
That's an evolution. In my view, I'm going to take it for this one, but in my view, I'm just convinced that is an evolution because we've been that way in the past. We have. That's your science. Go look it up. Where we were self-contained and both of those things separating us into two things was probably not supposed to happen. And now we're headed back to this one thing where we are all, how can any New Ager, if that's what you are, not understand this idea of the all in one, where we are self-contained. We are both of those things. We are all of those things. So there's a lot going on out there right now that people are acting like, well, that's one of them. People are acting like chimps throwing their own crap at you through the monkey bars, through the bars of their cages because they're scared. This kind of stuff scares them. Food is one of those things. We are evolving, re-evolving. We are evolving back to a state where we should be, but we can't do that without understanding. I don't think we can do that without understanding how profoundly addicted we are to that which they have used to enslave us.
Going back to the transgender piece of it, Cara, Martin Kenny and I actually talked about this in one of the shows that we did going back a few months ago. And it is a very, very combustible topic because when you try to lay it out the way you did, alchemically, they're looking for unification.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, what I'm going to say, and that's all I'm going to say about it, folks, okay, because this show is not about this, but if you understand the concept, theoretically, what Cara is talking about, fine, and then you're getting it. We're not saying the way it's going about is good or bad, the way it's being presented. Okay,
right.
We're talking about it from a much higher level.
Right.
A much higher level. If it's something that really bothers you for us to even have this discussion, then just let it go and move on.
Right, right.
Okay? We're not advocating anything. We're just saying when we talk about this type of stuff, this is what I do. I have to try to position myself to think in terms of what I refer to as the pyramid of power, the controllers.
Yeah.
What do the controllers do and how do the controllers think? And I don't pretend to know everything about the controllers, what they do, how they think, and all that stuff. But I try to invest my understanding in how they go about this. And everything that they do is embedded in the mystery religions. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
And if you study the mystery religions, then this type of discussion about unification of the sexes and stuff like this becomes more understandable. And that's about as much as I'm going to say on it, because there are going to be people right now that are screaming at their monitor and their speakers.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so. I hope so, Mike.
That's all I'll say about it.
I hope so. I think that we need to, when it comes to this kind of truly radical, in-depth thinking and discussion, we need to hit that nerve with people so that they really feel deeply about what we're saying. Okay. And before we leave that one topic, because I've been kind of following this in the social media and things like that, and my own knowledge of many people who are engaged in this arena. If you cannot get with the idea of non-binary or gender fluidity or those sorts of things that are being talked about, right? Can I ask you from the bottom of my heart to not make it worse? You don't have to support it, but could you possibly not make it worse? These people are trying to be very brave, courageous, talk about it, okay? Some of them. Just, you don't have to agree with it, but just try not to make it worse. You know what I mean? For them, that's my ask right now in that arena. But it's very much the same kind of thing as coming as an evolution back to who we're supposed to be, the integrity of our physicality, our etheric body, our astral body, all of those things. One of the most insidious assaults, one of the most permanent assaults was this introduction of what others labeled as food. Okay, food. Think about it. Think about yourself in relation to what you put in your mouth. Okay? Think about how enslaved we are. Think about the monarchies that are kept going by the sweat of the toil of the people who are growing rice. I mean, it really does come down to that. It does come down to that. Peasants growing, farmers growing. God bless the farmer, but because they think they're being, and they are in many ways being autonomous, they are, but actually they're a bit of a slave to a system that's enslaving, unless they're doing things just for themselves, which most people aren't. They have to sell a little bit of their extra to get a little money, right? Anyway, Mike, I'm going to do a lecture about this online in a couple weeks. I'll get more in depth with that. That's February 16th. Mike has all the information. If you want to come to that, please do. And then the book will come out in a couple of weeks, and maybe give this a couple of months to sort of sink in, to hit the consciousness. Yeah. Let's think about this. Let's sleep on this for a couple months. And I promise you in a couple months, we'll have some deeper things to say about it. And thank you to Mike for giving me the opportunity to talk about this for the first time.
Oh, anytime, Cara. Anytime. This is better than talking about the same old.
Oh my God, Mike.
Just beating stuff into the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not gonna continue to try to wake people up about chemtrails anymore, blah, blah, blah.
No. We talked about this before the show started, and I may as well just repeat it a little bit here, that Cara and I were talking, and I had said that I don't view my job as being responsible for waking people up. The responsibility of waking up is on the individual.
Right.
Is on each one of everyone who's listening to this, or even if you're not listening to this. Everybody has a responsibility for themselves. What I do is I just put information out, either through my guests or if I happen to be a guest on a topic that I'm talking about. That's it. I'm not asking anybody to agree with me. If it resonates, fine. If it doesn't resonate, that's fine too, because at the end of the day, my life goes on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Life goes on.
As Mike and I are busy trying to walk our talk now. We're trying to walk our talk by populating our lives with activities that bear witness to what we're trying to say. And we're not being all vocal about that. We're just doing it.
Right. And part of that doing it is living your life.
Yeah.
And having quality time with your family.
Yep.
And your friends.
Yep.
Okay. Whether they're awake or not awake is irrelevant. Like I said, everybody has their own rate and pace. They're here for whatever it is they're here to learn. But that's a big piece of living here. And if you're going to invest all of your time in negative stuff, dark stuff, then what's going to happen is you are going to sub-optimize your own life. You're going to sub-optimize your own happiness.
Right.
So you have to strike a balance. There is a balance to looking at conspiracy or digging into alternative research and enjoying why you're here.
That's right. That's right.
Otherwise
they win, dude. They win.
Exactly.
And that's the last thing I want to have happen.
Right. That's exactly right.
So I spent 6 years traveling and talking about my books and writing new books and trying to get people to bums in seats to listen to what I had to say. And then I said, you know what? I can do that. I'm going home to my kids. I need my family. I love my family. I need my family. And it's time to just put all this stuff into practice. Let other people pick up the hue and cry that happens when you first discover something. That's always going on, right?
Right.
Now I just want to live my life the way I said it should be lived.
Yeah. It's funny. I was having a conversation with Barry, and I was talking about sometimes you get to the point where you think to yourself, how much further can I take this? How much more of this is really something I want to do? Because I've been doing it a long time, you know?
Yeah.
And there's that part of you that says, oh, if I don't continue to do it, am I coming up short?
Yeah.
Am I failing?
Yeah.
And, she gave me a shot of reality, and she says, Mike, how long have you been doing it? I said, well, the blog, 8 years or so, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And I said, the radio show is 5 years now or something.
Right.
And she says, you've paid your dues.
Yeah, exactly.
You've put enough content out there. You've done what it is that you felt you needed to do. And at some point you decide that you're going to go do something else because that's where your heart takes you.
Yep. Do it.
Then you do it.
You do it.
You do it.
That's right. Exactly.
So if I sound like I've mellowed out a little bit, folks, it's because I have mellowed out a little bit.
Well, you just have to understand. I mean, this is another thing Mike and I have been talking about off and on for a good year is what is our place in this community? What is this community for? Where do we put our energy? How much good is that doing? I mean, these are things this is self-reflection. And if you don't self-reflect, then you're just a narcissist and you're just out there for the attention. And neither one of us is out there for that. So.
No, I'm not interested in attention. And in fact, I'm a very private person. And people might find that kind of weird. It's like, well, you do a radio show and you're a private person. Yeah, you could do a radio show and still be a private person.
Yeah, but that's because you're being driven to talk about something that you have to talk about. It's really that simple.
Exactly. And then when you hang up the headphones and you put the microphone away, you're living life.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what I'm going to go do? I'm going to go dig my car out from under the snow, and I'm going to kiss it on its hood for starting.
Yeah.
In the middle of this ice storm. Okay, that's what I'm going to do.
What I'm going to do is go take the dog for a walk.
There you go.
So there you go.
There you go. There you go. Great. Thank you so much, Mike. You're the best.
You're welcome, Cara. You're welcome anytime, and I'll have the show out as quickly as I can.
Okay, sounds good to me, and you'll probably end up with a PDF of the book.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you're like my, what is it, that dead man switch stuff, No, Mike's got a copy of it. Okay.
Yeah. If anything happens to me.
All right. Hi to everybody. All right.
All right, Cara.
Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.